Welcome back, guys. In the final video of this series, I'll demonstrate to you one of my favorite basic staple recipes, an 80% hydration, 20% whole grain wheat sourdough bread. Let's get started. I like to begin by preparing my sourdough levain. I mix the sourdough starter at an equal ratio with flour and water, 55 grams each. I like to use a flour mix that contains 10% rye flour and 90% bread flour. This allows for maximum activity of the starter. Stir well. We'll go ahead and cover and let rest someplace warm, approximately 5 to 6 hours, or until the levain has tripled or has become fully activated. A couple hours before the levain is ready, I'll prepare an autolyse, or pre-soak, of my flours. Here I've got a mix of whole wheat and bread flours. I'll add water and mix well using the dough hook on my mixer. Be sure to scrape down the bowl as you mix as necessary. I do not want to overmix, so I'll keep the speed low and mix just until no dry flour remains. Cover and let rest in the bowl approximately 2 hours or until the levain is ready. Next, we will mix in the activated levain and sea salt. You can see here that the levain after 5 hours has become quite active and has actually tripled in volume. We'll go ahead and sprinkle onto the autolyse the sea salt and then add on top the levain. The addition of levain and sea salt to the pre-soak initiates what is called the bulk fermentation stage. Using the dough hook, mix approximately 2 to 3 minutes on speed 2 to 3 until the ingredients are fully incorporated. Afterwards, spritz onto your counter a fine mist of water. Turn out the dough onto the counter and divide the dough into 2 equal quantities. Each dough here weighed about 710 grams. I like to fold each dough up into a ball and then transfer the dough balls into a separate low-profile dish. Allow the dough to rest for about 45 minutes at warm room temperature. At this point, you'll begin a series of coil folds. These coil folds build up strength and structure in the dough. Note how slack the dough currently looks prior to the coil fold. Using wet hands, reach under the dough and pull up from the center of the mass, allowing the dough to lift off from the dish and then fold back on itself. Perform the same folding on all 4 sides. Cover and let rest another 45 minutes. We're now on to the second coil fold. Note that the dough has strengthened since we performed the first fold, and the dough will continue to strengthen throughout the bulk as the dough begins to ferment. We're going to repeat these coil folds, one every 45 to 60 minutes, until the dough is nicely strengthened and can hold its shape well. At around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, the total bulk fermentation stage will take around 5 to 6 hours, and we will be able to fit in around 5 coil folds during this time. If you're bulk fermenting at a warmer temperature, you may need to cut the length of your bulk stage, and if you're bulking at lower temperatures, you will likely need to increase your bulk ferment. What is important is that the dough increases in volume during this time. From the time you add the levain to the time you tip out the dough to shape, the dough should rise approximately 60% in volume. Now moving on to shaping. At the end of the bulk stage, or once the dough has increased in volume approximately 60%, flip out the dough onto a well-floured countertop. I'll show you 2 ways to shape your dough, as well as 2 ways to prep your bannetons. For the batard shape, pull out the edges of the dough and fold into the center. Then roll down the dough from the top towards the bottom. Pinch the sides to finish up. For a boule, fold the dough from the edges into the center of the mass, repeating until you've completed the folding all the way around. Turn the dough right side up and use your hands to gently pull the dough towards yourself against the friction of the counter to create a taut skin. Prepare your bannetons while the doughs rest. For the batard shape, we'll proof directly against the rattan basket without a liner. To do this, dust the banneton liberally with a layer of brown rice flour. For the boule shape, we'll use a liner. You can sprinkle just a bit of brown rice flour on the surface of the liner. We'll lightly dust the surface of the dough, and then using a bench knife, turn the rested dough over, seams side up, and gently transfer to the respective bannetons, and cover. We'll let the dough rest in the banneton overnight in the refrigerator to final proof. The next morning, preheat your oven to 475 degrees Fahrenheit with a Dutch oven, cast iron, or similar baking vessel inside. Carefully flip your fully proofed, cold dough onto a sheet of parchment cut to size, and use a razor blade or serrated knife to carefully score the top of the dough. Perform the same flip out onto parchment with the boule and carefully score the top of the loaf using the razor blade. We'll use the flaps of the parchment paper to transfer the dough to the Dutch oven. Remember to use heat-safe gloves to help transfer the doughs to the baking apparatus, and cover tightly with the lid. Get these into the oven and bake at 475 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes with the lid on. Once the dough is baking, I like to move my bannetons, which may be slightly damp, to rest on top of the cooktop where it is nice and warm. This will speed up drying of the rattan and liner surface. After the first 20 minutes of the bake, you can remove the lid and take a peek at your lovely homemade bread. We'll get these back into the oven and continue baking another 20 minutes at a lower temperature of 450 degrees Fahrenheit. If you can wait, allow the loaf to cool at least 2 hours before slicing. Hope you're able to give this recipe a try, and I hope you love working with your Bread Boss's Bannetons. Happy baking!